Hey everybody, welcome to the Shut Up and Do It podcast, a place you can come hang out with us while we go through all things real estate with a focus on bringing you top quality topics and speakers, all who believe in a get it done manner. I'm your host, Nick Allerud, creator of the Complete Deal Flow System and a principal with AA Real Estate Group, and function as an educator and active single-family, multifamily real estate buyer in the Boston area and beyond. Today, we have a topic that's so near and dear to my heart, and I'm so excited to have found someone who shares in this topic and who knows exactly what is going on in the industry with it. He's also a man who's been through it all, as you'll hear in his story as he talks about himself. This gentleman's name is Fernando Angelucci. Fernando, thanks for being on the podcast today, brother.
Yeah, Nick, I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
That's awesome. You are from the Chicago market, right?
That's right. It's cold out here right now. Oh, I thought we had it this year, man. Thought we had it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thought you had it on your glass too. No worries. All the love. Everything's love here. So, Fernando, hey, tell us a little bit about kind of why real estate. How'd you get into it in the beginning?
Yeah, let me start all the way from the beginning. So when I was 16 years old, I was given a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I started reading it and immediately just fell in love. I think I finished the book in like 2 days. From there, I went to my parents and I said, hey, I really want to do this real estate thing. I'm not so sure about college. And to which their basic response was like, over my dead body, right? So both my parents are immigrants from Brazil. They came here with kind of the American dream in mind, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, work there for 40 years, retire with a pension, right? We all know that that's not really the case anymore. It's hard to even find a job where they'll match you on 401k. But my dad convinced me. He said, hey, go get an engineering degree. So at least you have something to fall back on. I said, all right. So I ended up graduating with an ag bioengineering degree. Technical systems management was the name of the focus. Throughout that entire time, I was reading about real estate. I read through all of Robert Kiyosaki's books. I went through his advisor series. I started reading other books that, the people that he would bring in would also write. Tom Wheelwright, Tax-Free Wealth, stuff like that. It was hysterical because, I'm going to college and, on a Friday night, I'd be in, drinking a beer, reading a book about, tax-free wealth. And my buddy would come in and say, what are you doing? Like, there's a party going on. I was like, nah, one day you'll see. One day, So ended up graduating. I went to.
What's the line? Do what others won't do now, so you can do what others can't do later. Something like that.
Exactly. That's huge. So I ended up moving to Iowa with a Fortune 50 company, working as a sales rep for them. That entire time, I was looking at real estate, trying to get involved. I finally decided that, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Started looking into the wholesale space, finally decided to end up quitting my job. So this is one of the things that I think is great for just shut up and do it. So I found that I was too comfortable, and that comfort was what was holding me back from really taking the risks I needed to take, right? So the very first thing I did is I pulled a exercise out of the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss called fear setting, where you sit down, you draw 2 lines, 0 to 10, 0 to 10. And then you take the decision that you're about to make. For me, it was quitting my job to start a real estate investing career. And then you mark the first line to be from 0 to 10. What is the worst thing that can happen from doing this, taking this decision? With 10 being I die, 9 being I go to prison for life, right? And I was like, it's probably not going to be that bad. If everything fails, I always have my degree to fall back onto. I can move in with my parents. I marked it as a 3. Okay. And then on the second line from 0 to 10, it's what is the total positive outcome that would happen? 0 being nothing changes, 10 being my life is completely changed for the better. And I put a 10. I wanted time freedom. I wanted money freedom. I wanted to be able to hang out with my friends and family whenever I wanted to, because that's the whole reason we're doing this, right? So I decided, I'm quitting. So got a few wholesale deals under my belt. I quit. And then this is the second part, which is like something to overcome. So I needed marketing money, and my marketing wasn't very toned in yet. So I needed a lot of capital to start learning things. So what I did was, in one night, I applied for like 64 credit cards. I got 8. I think on the first round, I got 8 approved. And it was, I think I had a total combined credit limit of like $98,000 or $99,000. I cash advanced like $95,000 right into my bank account to start the business. So that's the shut up and do it. Like now I have, not only do I not have a job that I can fall back on, I have maybe 2 to 3 months runway to pay my rent and my groceries that are in my checking account and 401k that I cashed out. And I now have all this credit card debt as a 22-year-old, right? So I was like, all right, you want to wake up with some motivation, some fire under your ass in the morning? Like, that's a great way to wake up in sweats. Just be like, well, I need a deal today, you know? ended up doing pretty well. So started wholesaling properties. Actually, the very first deal I wholesaled was with Mark Lane, who's in Collective Genius with us.
Nice.
So with Mark, I got my first deal and then started growing that. Very quickly started to see the money that my cash buyers were making. So I decided, hey, maybe I need to jump into this avenue as well. So very first thing I started with was kind of backwards, as I started with multifamily properties. Bought first 5-unit property, cash flowed it really well. None of my own cash. It was an investor that trusted me, and he gave me a shot. And to this day, I still partner with him. He, took a chance on me, and I did all the management. He got all the upside from the deal and half of the cash flow. So that's how I learned multifamily at first. It's crazy how different it is from what the books say it's going to be like versus what it really is.
Oh, it's all passive. It's passive. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was first managing myself, it was not all passive. And then even after I got a property manager for that property, there was still a lot of involvement on my part for the management of that deal. But I ended up selling it at a profit, returned all my investors' money plus some. Then he got cash flow. I got cash flow. It was a great deal.
Nice.
Then I immediately started getting into fix and flips. And the first fix and flip I got into was also a partnership. So, and you'll kind of notice a trend in my investing career here that I am a big fan of partnerships. I know you're just going through a dissolving one yourself here, but I'll kind of give some tips on those out there that are looking to kind of leverage other people's experience and money. So the first flip I did, it was a wholesale deal. I was slated to make about $5,000 on the wholesale fee. The investor came to me and said, hey, you know what? I'm a very abundance, minded investor. I've seen you speak at all these REIAs. I really like your values, and then they align with mine. How about instead of you taking a $5,000 wholesale fee on this deal, you just partner with me 50-50. You don't have to bring any of the cash up. We'll go borrow most of it from a hard money lender, and I'll put down the rest. And at first I was flabbergasted because I was just like, this is not a good deal for you. It's a great deal for Fernando. It's not a good deal for Guy. But, and that's my partner, Guy Varble. Guy ended up coming and teaching me everything. He taught me. It was great because it wasn't a very easy flip. We had a couple bumps along the way, and I know you like to deep dive into some of those bumps. So I'll go through some of these right now. Very first thing is we started having issues with the layout of the property. The biggest issue that we had was we had a contractor that ended up not only robbing our property, but robbing like 3 other flips in that area that same weekend. So we had to take that loss. We had to find a new contractor. So we didn't make as much money as we thought we were going to, but we still made a profit. And I learned a lot of great lessons, background check for contractors, making sure you have plan B, plan C, plan D, making sure that you have multiple exits already slated for this property. Hey, maybe if it doesn't work for the flip, is there a way that we can immediately refinance this hard money lender out, maybe do a buy and hold, right? So that was a great learning lessons on that deal. From there, I started opening up other markets to wholesale in. The reason I moved away from Des Moines was it's a very small market. I think the MSA has like 600,000 people. So when I would go to these showings with these off-market sellers, it'd be me and like 3 other wholesalers, one of which was Mark. And then like 4 of my cash buyers were also there. And it's just like, oh, damn it. Like, how am I going to get this at a good price, And then being able to flip it to one of the buyers here,
Yeah.
So I eventually started branching out to other markets, Florida, Indiana, Texas, and then Illinois, Chicago. Chicago is where we decided to really focus in on, stop getting distracted by the shiny object syndrome. And we really focused down on this market, came out with a huge marketing campaign, like 46,000 letters right off the bat with my partner, Stephen Ware. Each one of these markets, the way I did it, instead of hiring people, well, I would just do joint venture partnerships. I would teach them everything I knew. And then I would even give them some startup capital or show them how to find startup capital for the marketing. And then we'd split all the deals 50-50 until they decided they no longer needed me in the wholesale business. And then we'd part ways, right?
Nice.
Yeah. So from there, we really focused in on the Chicago market. We closed down all the other markets and started wholesaling here. Now we're up to about 50 deals a year on the wholesale side. We have around 6,100 buyers on our buyers list. And they're very well trained, which is great. You know, they don't really negotiate our fees. They know that there's other buyers sitting in line, so they don't play games on the price. It's a great situation. And we've been really focusing on delegating and elevating in that business, implementing traction, you know, the EOS system, making sure that our new hires are not only, you know, the right people, but they're in the right seats, using personality assessments like the DISC test and Myers-Briggs. And then we also started buying rental properties out here, multifamily and single family.
I'm going to stop you real quick, Fernando. So when you right now being in Chicago, you've got a JV partnership still, or now is it back? Are you guys now full partners? Is that what you guys are still doing?
Yeah. So me and Steven are full partners. We've been partners since I moved to this market. So
nice.
The way that I partnered with Steven, he was actually one of my best friends from college, random assignment roommate. You know, he was just one of the other roommates in the dorm we had. And his skill set's completely complementary to mine. Extremely emotionally intelligent. He is an amazing creative style person. So marketing, advertising, PR, that's his bread and butter. He knows the social media stuff. I may be a millennial, but I always tell people I'm a boomer stuck in a millennial's body. I don't like social media. I don't like using technology for the most part in my personal life. That is. So he was a great partner to have. And how we started partnering was after college, I'd send him pictures of my wholesale checks, being like, how much money did you make today? You know, I made $5,000. And he ended up getting salty, rightfully so, to the point where he's like, all right, you either have to teach me how to do this or you got to stop sending me these pictures, these checks. And I said, I'd be glad to teach you how to do this. So we started teaching him how to do it. He started running the Chicago market for a while until I eventually moved there from Iowa. And we really kind of hunkered down on that market.
Very cool. How did you run when you started in all those other markets too, before you settled on Chicago, you must have had one heck of was it a software you guys were using to kind of track all your marketing or the responses or no?
Yeah. So we were using, at that time, we were using Podio.
Okay.
So just a custom app built out of Podio with GlobiFlow on the back end for the automations. Mm-hmm. Then where we really started to gain a lot of traction was when we implemented investor views as our backend CRM. And then we also started implementing traction as the organizational processes for running the business itself. Yeah. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, it's a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. It's a great book. Every entrepreneur, not just real estate investor, but every entrepreneur should look at it if they don't have a system of managing their company. As opposed to just working in it every day. It's working on the company to grow it.
If you're a new listener, by the way, this is the Shut Up and Do It podcast with Fernando Angelucci, and he mentioned a book named Traction. And if you go back you'll see a solid pattern of the speakers here that we have. Traction is definitely one of those, and Rich Dad Poor Dad's one other. So, but keep going, man. You're on a roll. I like it.
Yeah. So started buying multifamily and single family area. We decided to start shutting down the other markets. And by shutting down, I just meant, hey, JV partner, whoever I had there, it's like, this is your business now. I'm getting out. So you no longer have to cut your wholesale checks, you know, half of them to me. And, you know, I wish you the best of luck. And so we focused on the Chicago market. Now we had buy and holds. We no longer were doing flips. So I'm not a big fan of working with contractors. I'm a little bit too nice of a guy to work with contractors, so I wasn't a very good construction manager. And then when we were starting to really get into the single multifamily, we were up to 29 units. And I started to, you can see my dog in the background here.
Hey, what's his name?
That's Nash. He's like the rescue greyhound.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's probably asked me to go outside. Um, so started to face a lot of issues in the buy and hold space. Chicago and Illinois are some of the worst tenant laws. They're very tenant friendly and not investor friendly at all. The taxes are really high, so your margins are pretty slim. I
We
ended
don't
up
know anything about tenant friendly here in Massachusetts.
having,
Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
and I was having a lot of issues with specifically what triggered me to finally just say like, I want to get out. Was we had a 13-month eviction from a tenant that we inherited when we bought a multifamily building. And
Oh,
she was a pro. She was a professional tenant. She knew all the tips and tricks, got with all the advocacy groups, and stalled this thing forever. It caused a lot of damage to the property. It was a nightmare. Um, we took a loss on that property. Around the same time, I'm down in Indianapolis for a real estate investment expo. And I'm sticking my head into the different breakout rooms because mine finished early. And I hear somebody talking about triple digit returns with basically no management, no tenants, no toilets, no trash. And I was like, yeah, right. So I go sit down. Turns out Scott Meyer's talking about self-storage investing. And I was just hooked from that day on. I walked up, I'm like, if you got like a mentorship program or a boot camp, like sign me up. I'm ready to go. So from there, we took all the classes. We did the mentorship programs with him. Started joining the self storage associations, the National Self Storage Association, getting our education up, and then we wanted to prove the concept. So we started wholesaling self storage facilities. Just to, if a buyer is willing to buy a deal off of me with my assignment fee in place, that means that I'm doing the numbers pretty good, right? Pretty well. So we wholesaled a few facilities, and then we ended up starting to buy our own buy and hold facilities. And then from there, when we were having trouble finding deals that replicated the first one we purchased, we started building this facilities from the ground up and flipping them. So I call it the slow flip. So the slow flip is, instead of me dealing with, the typical single family selling to a emotional buyer that all they care about is the way that the countertop looks in a certain light or whatever. Now my buyers are these institutional hedge funds and privately and publicly traded companies, these REITs, where all they really care about are the numbers, the demographics. If everything makes sense, they buy. There's no games, there's no emotional side to it. And that has proven to be a very fruitful endeavor as well. So now, instead of me doing buy and hold multifamily and single family, I'm selling all those properties. I'm down to like 5 more properties I need to sell. And I'm replacing that with buy and hold income from the self-storage facilities that I'm buying, the existing facilities. And then on the flip side, for the big paychecks, we're building these facilities for REITs, and we're either selling them at certificate of occupancy, or we're leasing them up ourselves and then selling them at full stabilization for an even higher premium.
nice. Very, very cool. I mean, that's the strategy of a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask, have you come across any bumps in the road yet with self-storage, or not quite yet?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the very first things that we notice is the sheer volume. So with single family and multifamily, there's tons of them everywhere. Self-storage is a more niche market. So we found that we had to really expand our geographic footprint to get the same type of volume that a regular wholesaler would get just like in one city, So I pulled a list of 28 different states, and those 28 states, after all my criteria that I put in, removing the REITs, removing the large companies, I came down to only about like 7,000 to 9,000 leads to mail to across 28 states. I can get 7,000 leads in just 3 or 4 neighborhoods in Chicago for potential marketing. So that was one of the roadblocks that we face, and we learned that you can't approach these sellers the same way that you'd approach a single family or a multifamily seller. It's not about the whole, hey, cash, quick close, easy to deal with, like mom and pop Fernando around the block over here buyer. It's not. With the self-storage, it's like, hey, we are a professional company. The letter's coming on professional letterhead. here are our funding sources so you can look them up. Here's the numbers so you can call them so you know we're real buyers. Here's the deals we've done in the past. It's a more professional approach, like company to company as opposed to individual to individual. Yeah. So that was the first roadblock. The second roadblock is just getting numbers. These self-storage owners, the mom and pop owners, specifically the ones that built the facilities during the boom, like mid to late 80s, it's such an easy business to manage that they don't really have to implement much management software or processes at all. So, getting numbers from guys asking for a P&L, they don't even know what I'm talking about. I say, well, just, go to your management software and just pull like a 12-month pull out. And they're like, we don't use software. It's pad and paper, or like at the most, it's like, oh yeah, I built a DOS system like in 1995 that has all my inputs for the facility, So that was the second biggest issue, was learning to basically estimate. So get the numbers that they actually have, bring them in, and then any holes that we have, filling in those holes with our estimated expenses and income based on all the other deals that we had been underwriting. So I have always learned in real estate, it's all about volume. The more deals you have in the funnel, the better the deals you get. The reason why is that deal of a lifetime, it'll come around every 6 months if you're doing enough volume to get a deal of a lifetime every 6 months.
Cheers. Absolutely. Nailed it.
Yeah. So that was one of the biggest headaches for us. I'll tell you one of the things that were not a headache for us that was in other parts of the industry was getting leverage, getting debt. Getting debt on single family homes is extremely difficult as a real estate investor, especially if you're just starting out. Same thing with multifamily. It starts getting easier once you get to the institutional grade stuff, where you can start getting, commercial backed securities as your mortgage, or commercial mortgage backed securities. But when you're trying to just get a standard loan, those are very difficult. I found the opposite to be true with self-storage. Banks love self-storage because historically it has the lowest default rate. It's one of the most recession tolerant asset classes, and it has one of the highest returns while still having that very low default rate. So I have some stats here I can share with you. During the recession,
it's almost like you came prepared. I mean, this is
So during the recession from 2007 to 2009, there was a survey of all the real estate based REITs as well as the benchmarks like the S&P 500 to see how much was lost during those 2 to 3 years. So between 2007 and 2009, self-storage only dropped 3.8% versus the S&P's 22% drop. Now let's go look at the opposite side. Well, still on that. So of the defaults, they also had the lowest amount lost per default. So there was another study done between 2011 and 2018 where self-storage had the lowest defaults of all real estate asset classes, and per default, the banks lost an average of 1.52% of the total principal that was out. So that's, for a bank, that's great, right? Because that shows that not only is it recession tolerant, but it also has high yields to pay off the debt service. So here's another statistic just to show you the average annual rate of return. From 1994 to 2017, so including the recession, self-storage returned an annual average of 17.43%, where the S&P only returned an average of roughly just shy of 8% annually during that time.
That's per year. Wow. Crazy.
So if you would have invested $100,000 in 1994, by 2017, that same $100,000 would be worth $4,026,000 today, or in 2017, I should say, during the study.
So where were you?
Show you.
Where were you in 1994, Fernando?
I was 3 years old in Westmont, Illinois. Yeah, I'm currently 27, so.
What a guy! This is brilliant.
Thanks, man. So these banks, they really love it, and just to show you a case study of how much they really love these properties, especially for leverage. We purchased a facility recently, about 6 months ago, or a little bit longer now, where we got a 30-year fixed fully amortized loan for a commercial property with only 20% down, and the rate was 5.25% interest across 30 years. So our cash flows look great. And then on top of that, they asked us, hey, for the first year, would you like interest only payments? I said, of course. That's just to show you how much, and this is they can't sell this type of loan on the secondary market. So they're holding it on their books for the life of the loan. So what they call a portfolio loan. That just shows you how much confidence these banks have in these type of assets.
That's awesome. Fernando, are you willing, if you're able to take a deep dive into one of your projects as far as, numbers, what you looked for, anything like that'd be great.
Let's do it. So I love having, very actionable items. So here's how let's go over that deal I was just talking about. So let's talk about how I first found it and what are the criteria I look for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Self-storage is a very localized business. It is one where your trade area, aka where the real competitors are, is only about 3 to 5 miles in radius. If you're in a dense inner city, it can be as low as 1 mile radius is where you'd look at your trade area. So what I mean by trade area is in this area, who are the potential competitors that could pull customers away from me or vice versa? And where are my customers coming from? So we found that 90% of your customers will usually come from your trade area. Because it's so localized, there's pockets everywhere that you can explore. You can't just say, oh, Chicago's great for self-storage. You can't say that. You could say, hey, this block of Chicago is great for self-storage, or this suburb of Chicago is great for self-storage, or even hyper-localized, like this part of this suburb is great for self-storage. So the very first things that I usually look for are supply index number, supply index ratio. All that is a ratio that tells me how much of the demand has been met by the supply. Very easy calculation. It's the net rentable square feet available in your trade area divided by the per capita, or the amount of population in that trade area. The average annual number that basically says you're at equilibrium is 7 net rentable square feet per person in your trade area. So we're always looking for stuff that's like 5 or below, 4 or below. This deal that we bought in Yorkville, it was sub 3, which means that if we doubled the amount of self-storage units in that sub-market, we still would not meet the total demand for self-storage. If self-storage, if the equilibrium is 7, if we double it, we're still at 6, that means there's still unmet demand in that area. That's number one. Number two is I look at the local competition. What is their vacancy rates? So in self-storage, totally stabilized assets are considered fully occupied at 90% occupancy. Why is that? The reason why is if you're above 90%, that means that you're not pushing rents high enough. And what we found through various studies is that 90% occupancy while pushing rents will yield you a higher net operating income than a 100% occupied facility at lower rents, right?
Yep, makes sense.
So I'll look at the local competition in that 3 mile radius, and I'll say, okay, what are these guys at? Are they all at 90+% occupancy? That means that there's unmet demand, and they're doing in a very aggressive pricing model as well. So there is opportunity for me to come buy a facility, expand a facility, build a facility. The next thing that we look at is the vehicle per day count on the curb cut. So that means, whatever street you can turn off to into my self-storage parking lot, we count how many vehicles pass through that street per day. Easy way, instead of being there with a clicker all day, is just to go on to the Department of Transportation website for your state, and they usually have traffic studies for almost every major thoroughfare. So we're always looking for anything that's going to be, minimum 12,000 cars per day. I prefer to see 16,000 cars per day as a minimum. I'm always looking for the cream puff deals. The next thing that I look at is the general demographic data. Can the local residents afford my facility, my services? So I'm always looking for a minimum of a median gross household income of around 45,000. That's the minimum. I prefer to see around 60 to 65,000. That's where we really feel comfortable. So then we could push rates and even start pushing for, higher quality Class A REIT grade facilities. So those are the main aspects that I look at. And then the last thing, if those all make sense, then I actually look at the facility itself. If I'm looking at an existing facility, and I say, hey, is there a value add component to this? Are they below market rents? Are they not offering auxiliary income producing avenues like selling locks and insurance and printing and moving supplies? Is there additional land that I can build more units on this property? Does it have a high vacancy rate that can be brought up because of poor management or managers? A common thing I see is these managers that are set, because it's such an easy asset to manage. Most of these mom and pop investors, once they no longer do the management themselves, they will hire a property manager or a manager to stay on site, and without the proper checks in place, those managers can become pirate landlord by offering units for cash, pocketing all the cash, and then writing on the reports that those are vacant units. These are very easy things to check just by walking the facility. So if all those things line up, then I really start to deep dive into the property, into the facility, and see what we can do. So let's use a case example of the Yorkville facility. So we bought a property in Yorkville, Illinois. We were looking at the deal. We ended up buying it for $970,000, which equated to a 7.75% cap rate at purchase. Once we did the underwriting, we realized that they were at 100% occupancy, which is a red flag, right? We always want to be at 90%. So at 100%, we already knew that the rents were too low. We didn't realize how low they were. As soon as we started digging deep into the rent rolls, we found that this guy, the previous owner, he was one of those guys that have the mentality of whatever your rent is when you first rent, that's going to be your rent for life. No rental increases regardless of what's going on in the economy, right? So we found that rents across the board were down. They were about 40% below market.
Whoa.
Yeah, crazy. We also found that he only had one way for his tenants to pay. All of his tenants would wait for a physical invoice to be mailed to them. Then they would write a check and send it back to this unmonitored, unlocked mailbox on the facility property because there's no office at this facility. So we immediately we created a website. So he had no online presence whatsoever, no Google, you couldn't find him, no website at all. We created a website, we did SEO. We added the ability to pay with credit card, debit card, ACH, direct deposit, money order, check, whatever you wanted. And then we started creating the marketing presence online to get the online traffic. Nowadays, especially in the millennial population and below, you don't drive the streets looking for a service. You usually Google the service that you want first. You find a few options. You maybe call them and then you go to the facility, right? So he was missing out on a lot of that traffic and was still able to be, above, at 100% occupancy. So we saw a lot of value add.
That's crazy.
On top of that, we found that, remember we were talking about that supply index number, and anything below 7 is a good number. We found that this facility was in an area where the supply index number was sub 3. So the ability to, not only was all the competition in the area fully occupied, but they were still not meeting half of the demand that they had in the area. So that was another opportunity. So we're actually going to be building an additional 80 to 100 units on that facility. So just some deep dive into the numbers. That property nets us, so after everything, nets us around $79,000 to $80,000 a year. After all these management controls that we put in place, the increasing of rents, the systemization of all the processes, we're going to get this thing, we're going to get an appraisal on it to do a cash out refinance to pull all of our money out, and then also to have money to build new units. We're going to be appraising around 1.5, 1.6 million when we bought it, 6-7 months ago at $1 million, call it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
huge growth in equity for that property.
What was the NOI going in, if you don't mind me asking, versus the NOI now?
Yeah, so the NOI going in was close to like 70,000 or so. Once everything shakes out, I just finished the taxes for the 2018 year. So 2019 year is when we started implementing a lot of the rental increases. There's a good chance that we'll be closer to like 100 something. So we're going to be shaking out to be like an internal cap rate of around 13%. And our refinance will fall around 1.5, 1.6 million, which will allow us to pull all of our down payment out in addition to cash tax free to use for the down payment on our construction loan.
It's pretty sexy, Fernando.
Yeah.
So, are you still also operating your wholesale business while you're doing this?
I am. Yeah. So the wholesale business now doesn't take.
Mike. Yeah, we lost your mic there, brother.
Trying to switch these out.
There you go.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
So, I not much time on the wholesale business, at least in the business. So I really tried to elevate myself to the position of visionary, and this is a tag that you'll find in Traction if you get once you guys read that book, not if. So what my goal is to always be finding out what are the next moves, to think in 10-year increments, not in 1-week increments. How can we systematize things in our business? How can we hire people to do things that I no longer need to do because it's not the highest value or the highest use of my time? A lot of my time is just spent, I'll be honest, is just drinking beers with investors, with people that want to give me money for these self-storage deals, sitting down with new wholesalers, teaching them how to get their business started, sitting down with new buy and hold investors, new self-storage investors. I'm very abundant with my time. I had somebody that took me under the wing in each one of the categories that I invest in now, and I like to pay it forward. It's one of those things that really brings me a lot of joy to see these other investors succeed because of the information I gave them. And then not to mention, every once in a while, they'll have a deal that's either too big for their britches or maybe they don't have the time to do it. And guess what do? They remember who was abundant with their time. They call Fernando, and now I get to make 50% of the profit off a deal I didn't even have to spend any marketing on, right? So yeah. I love it. Yeah, that's what I do a majority of the time now. Like I've done like 4 podcasts today. I'm going to go to a networking open house at the end of the day. Like great. It's a great business.
That's brilliant, man. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I know we covered an awful lot today on self-storage and the wholesaling business. Curious, a lot of our audience loves to know, while you're like networking, being the visionary, doing your self-storage thing, right? What was the first key hires that you made? Like, what was the hardest, I don't want to say hardest part, but what was the first steps to sort of systemizing a wholesaling business?
Yeah. So my very first hire was a VA from India, and that crashed and burned very quickly.
Thanks for being
and it was my fault, so I didn't have the proper processes in place. I was kind of relying on we were going to hire him as a lead manager. So we were relying on him to basically write his own processes and to hold himself accountable, which we found it's a very rare trait amongst people out there, to hold themselves, to be truly intrinsically motivated. Usually they're the owners of the companies, not the people that work in them. Yeah. That crash and burned really quickly. We found out that he was, visiting unsavory websites on company time. He was cutting corners. We were losing deals. So we actually had to let him go pretty quickly after learning a pretty expensive lesson. So then we tried again with a first hire. This time, instead of it being a lead manager that was virtual, we went combination role of lead manager and acquisition manager, and to have him be local to the area. He was actually a good friend of mine from back in the day. He was he called me after hearing me on a few podcasts. And he said, "Hey, I'm a real estate agent now. I'd love to work on the off market side with you on the investments. Like, how do we get started?" So I spent time with Brian, and he became our first acquisition manager and lead manager. A lot of learning lessons hiring my first employee full time, right? So one of the things I learned is you have to have the processes in place, and you have to really spend time mentoring your new employees. If it's not you, maybe you have someone you hire, depending on the size of your company. Maybe you outsource it to another company. I know there's a bunch of them that will do sales training for you. But that was super important, just spending the time with him and saying, hey, here's how we do it. Let me go on appointments with you. Let me run numbers on properties with you. Here's the processes that you can follow to refer back to if you don't remember every little thing I said. So that was a huge learning lesson. We lost a bunch of deals while he was getting caught up to speed because I handed over the reins to him without fully training him first. Right now, he's great. He's crushing it, and we're looking for another acquisition manager as well.
Nice. I had that exact same mistake that you just mentioned, that last part. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm hiring you. Here's the job description. Ready, go. And like,
Go.
yeah, it's like, it didn't work out for us either. So surprisingly. So
Yeah.
But no, thank you for being real. But so now you've got your people in place to a point, right? And you constantly, is it you working on the actual back office systems, or do you have, an implementer, an integrator doing that now on your behalf?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So me and my partner, Stephen Ware, we kind of share the integrator role. We're going to be end up hiring somebody that's going to be a full-time integrator for us.
Okay, cool.
We haven't had to get to that point just yet, but we've been basically covering both roles, visionary and integrator. He's more integrator than I am. I'm more visionary than he is, but we help out on both sides. So the back end is really, we put it on our employees and say, hey, if you find yourself doing something twice, just how Steve and I have the ability to elevate and delegate, you also have that ability. If you want to hire a VA, or if you want to hire somebody to take the workload off of your back, start creating processes, start writing them down. And through that effort of, always stressing, hey, if you find yourself doing anything twice, write the procedure down. It's going to take 5 times as long to do it while you're writing the procedure, but then once you do it, it's done. And then you can find somebody to do it for you. Or we can find the technology to do it for you, or we can find a VA to do it for you, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Nailed it. That's awesome. You mentioned Tim Ferriss earlier in this podcast, and Fernando, in the spirit of Tim Ferriss, he asked one question in his Tools of Titans book that I love to ask our guests as well. And it's, what is the best purchase you've made in the last 12 months that's been under $100? Do you happen to have a thought on that?
That is a good one. Under $100.
Oh, you don't have that in your papers in front of you, huh?
No.
You weren't prepared for that question.
Yeah. So can I say it would be a book? Is that all right?
Yes, you can. Sure.
Okay.
I mean, it's a cop-out, but no, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Okay. Actually, here you go. Under $100 thing that I purchased, DocuSign, full enterprise level DocuSign membership. It has sped up the time from offer presentation to receipt of signed contracts. It has helped with joint venture agreements. It has helped with non-disclosure agreements. It's crazy that it took me 4 years to actually purchase the paid version of DocuSign.
That's actually a great answer, because we've been struggling with this too. It's like, I don't want to pay another annual fee for this. We've already got Dotloop. We've got, Adobe Fill and Signs. We've got all sorts of tools, but there's not one all full service solution except what you just mentioned. So
DocuSign's great. I mean, I can get purchase agreements signed on phones. I can get them sent to the contractor right from the signing. That DocuSign mixed with, there's an app that's free that I downloaded called Scannable. Allows me to scan contracts around the hood of my car, or my acquisition manager to scan contracts on the hood of the car, and then to send them out to to the title companies and to the attorneys to get everything rolling. It really does speed up the entire process. And DocuSign is one of those things that's so easy that even for an old timer that doesn't like to use technology, it's like, do you see the yellow button? Just keep clicking the yellow buttons and you're done. That's it. There's nothing. You don't need to download anything. You don't need to print out anything and rescan. It makes it a lot faster from offer to contract.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about yourself, Tim, about that old person stuck in that young person's body there. So that was good. That was good. Awesome. Hey, Fernando, how can people get a hold of you? How can they learn more about you and what you're looking for? And,
Yeah. So the biggest things that we're looking for right now is, equity investors that want to get involved in self-storage but aren't comfortable enough to take on the first deal by themselves. So we always will partner with people, and then after, we tell them exactly how we underwrite, how we do the management, and then if they want to go on their own to do their own self-storage deals, like, you can always give me a call. So I'm going to do something that my partner hates that I do, but I always give out my cell phone number on podcasts so people can call and text me with any questions they have. I love to be abundant with my time. And if people, especially wholesalers out there, people that are doing their own buy and hold, if you just want some advice, feel free to bounce it off of me. So here it is. My cell phone number is 630-408-8090. That truly is my cell phone number. So easiest ways to get a hold of me is through text message. After hours, I have more availability to answer the phone call live, and then email. So another way people can get a hold of us is go to our website at titanwealthgroup.com. You can find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just type in Titan Wealth Group or type in my name, Fernando Angelucci, and you'll find us. So we put out a bunch of great content as well. So yeah, feel free to, honestly, I'm not just saying this and then won't answer. If you guys call or text me, I'll get right back to you.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I did just check it though. That was a call rail number routed me to Pat Live that routed me to good for you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You tons and tons of value today, man. And this is definitely a topic, as I mentioned to you before the show, is near and dear to my heart. And I'm sure we'll be doing something together. So
yeah, likewise.
Yeah, that's awesome. Guys, thank you all so much for listening to another episode of the Shut Up and Do It podcast. I'm your host, Nick Allerud. We had our guest, Fernando Angelucci, on talking about self-storage. And I will see you on the next one. Don't forget to tune in to our Thursdays at 1 p.m., aarecoaching.com, our online live Q&As. And I'll see you on the next one.